I remember the night of my mother-in-law's birthday dinner in Rome, as if it were seared into my skin. The restaurant shimmered with golden light, the kind of place where tables are dressed in crisp linens, crystal glasses catch the glow of chandeliers, and every whisper feels like a performance. Yet there I stood, paralyzed, realizing there was no chair for me at the table. My husband Sean chuckled lightly. Oops, guess we miscounted, and the rest of the Caldwell family laughed as if it were a harmless mistake. But it wasn't. It was a stage, a carefully constructed humiliation, and I was its unwilling star. I felt my chest tighten, but no tears came. Instead, I heard my own voice, calm and deliberate, cut through the air. Seems I'm not family. For a moment, the laughter faltered. 12 pairs of eyes turned toward me, their expressions ranging from fake confusion to barely concealed satisfaction. That was their script. I was meant to crumble, to storm out and confirm the narrative they had written for me, that I didn't belong, that I wasn't strong enough to handle their world. But what they underestimated was the kind of woman I had become. My name is Anna Caldwell, though once before I ever married into their family, I was Anna Morgan, founder of Elite Affairs, Boston's premier event planning company. 5 years earlier, I was just a self-made woman who had fought for every inch of her success. I put myself through business school, working late nights and weekends, and I built a company that became synonymous with elegance and precision. If there was a society wedding, a corporate gala, a charity ball in Boston, circles of wealth odds were high that my fingerprints were all over it. That was how I met Sean. He strode into my life like someone stepping out of a magazine, tall, well-dressed, a smile that crinkled at the corners of his eyes, carrying the kind of confidence you only learn when you've never had to worry about money. He praised my work at the gala I had organized for Boston Children's Hospital, and I remember feeling seen, admired, even for more than just the surface. When he pursued me, I convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, he was different from his family. I ignored the first warning signs. His mother Eleanor eyeing me at our first dinner together, with a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes, remarking how self-made success is so American. The way conversations at family gatherings would circle around topics of wealth and lineage I could never contribute to. The casual dismissal of my achievements as though my business was nothing more than a charming hobby. But I brushed it all aside because I believed in love and I wanted to believe in him. When Sean proposed, I said yes, despite knowing deep down that the Caldwell's world would never truly accept me. I threw myself into planning our wedding, unwilling to hand over control to another planner. It became a battle of compromises, Eleanor rejecting venues as not traditional enough, menus as too adventurous, guest lists as not distinguished. Sean played peacemaker, but I noticed he never contradicted his mother directly. Still, I told myself it was normal, that marriage meant compromise, and that love would protect us from the fractures. After the wedding, those fractures widened. I was no longer an outsider looking in. I was inside their home, but treated as an intruder. My input at family gatherings was solicited only to be dismissed. Ideas I contributed to their events were twisted and claimed as their own. I smiled politely, endured the patronizing pats on my hand as Eleanor introduced me, as if I were merely a convenient party planner who happened to marry her son. And Sean, the man I once thought would be my ally, shrugged it all off. That's just how she is, he'd say, as though that excused everything. Still, I fought to hold on. My business thrived, and I clung to that identity even as my role in the Caldwell family diminished to something ornamental. Then came the opportunity to plan Eleanor's 70th birthday in Rome, a week-long celebration culminating in a dinner overlooking the Colosseum. It should have been my crowning professional achievement, proof to them that I wasn't just Sean's wife, but someone with vision, talent, and worth. I poured myself into it, securing venues, arranging private tours, designing menus that balanced tradition with innovation. I leveraged every contact I had, drawing favors from vendors who trusted me. But as I worked, I began noticing cracks in their facade. Payments delayed, vendors calling about deposits that should have been covered. When I asked Sean, he brushed it off, but late one night I glimpsed his laptop screen, investments gone sour, properties, mortgage lines of credit stretched thin. The great Caldwell fortune wasn't as endless as they pretended. I said nothing. Instead, I used my own company's credit to cover deposits, telling myself it was temporary. That once this birthday week was over, we'd talk and he'd explain. That was before his phone buzzed one morning while he was in the shower. I never checked his phone, but something made me glance. A message glowed on the screen. "Can't wait to see you in Rome. Have you told her yet?" My hands trembled as I opened the thread messages from Vanessa, his college girlfriend, the woman his parents always adored, the woman they once expected him to marry. The texts stretched back months, plans made, futures discussed, and then the line that hollowed me out: "Our baby is due in 4 months." I remember how the room tilted around me, how my breath caught in my chest, yet I moved with eerie calm. I took screenshots, forwarded them to myself, deleted the evidence from his phone, and went on with the day. I packed, smiled, boarded the plane to Rome, and played the role of dutiful wife while inside I seethed. And then in Rome, the humiliations began in earnest. Family shopping trips I wasn't invited to, tours rescheduled without my knowledge, meals where I was pushed to the far end of the table, far from Sean's side, whispers that stopped when I approached. I told myself I could endure it until after the dinner, until I had time to confront him privately. But then I found the draft divorce papers in his briefcase, prepared months earlier, proposing a pittance of settlement. Attached was a script outlining how he would announce our separation at his mother's birthday dinner, spinning it as mutual and amicable, timed perfectly for their social calendar. That missing chair at the table in Rome wasn't a mistake. It was the culmination of their plan to erase me, to discard me, to humiliate me publicly. But what they never anticipated was that I had one thing they couldn't take from me: control. I was the event planner. Every contract, every deposit, every arrangement bore my name, not theirs. And in that moment, as humiliation threatened to crush me, I realized I held the power to turn their perfect dinner into their undoing. The night air in Rome carried the faint scent of jasmine and exhaust, the city humming with life beyond the marble halls of our hotel. I stared at the empty chair that had been my assigned place at Eleanor's birthday dinner and felt something inside me solidify. The humiliation was supposed to erase me, but instead it etched something sharper into my bones. Rage, yes, but also clarity. I wasn't just Anna, the unwanted daughter-in-law. I was Anna Morgan, the woman who built an empire of elegance with nothing but grit and determination. And I was about to remind them of it. I excused myself from the table without another word. My heels clicked against the cobblestones as I walked back to my suite, each step steady, each breath measured. Once inside, I locked the door and allowed myself a single moment to sag against the wall, my chest tight, my eyes burning. Then I pushed off and strode to my desk where my laptop waited. Pulling up the contracts, I confirmed what I already knew. Every venue, every vendor, every performer had been secured under my name through my company. The Caldwells had paraded through Rome all week, enjoying the fruits of my labor, without realizing I was the architect of every detail. They thought I was just the ornament at Sean's side. They forgot that the ornament held the strings. I drafted the emails quickly, my fingers flying over the keyboard. To the caterers, cancel the dinner service. To the musicians, release the date. To the venue, retract the deposit, cancel the booking. Each message was formal, polite, and final. My name carried the authority, and my contracts gave me the right. With a single click, their glittering evening dissolved into smoke. When I finished, I sat back and stared at the screen, my pulse thrumming. It wasn't just revenge, it was reclamation. They had tried to erase me, but now their grand stage would collapse because I refused to play my part. The fallout came swiftly. At 9 o'clock, I received the first call from Eleanor herself. Her voice was sharp, clipped, every syllable vibrating with fury. "What have you done?" she demanded. I listened to her tirade, her disbelief that the chefs had walked out, that the hall had closed its doors. Then I said the words I had rehearsed in my head all night. "What I've done," I told her, my voice low and even, "is refuse to be humiliated. Enjoy your empty tables, Eleanor. I'm finished being disposable." Then I hung up. 10 minutes later, Sean stormed into the suite, his tie loose, his face red with rage. He slammed the door behind him, the sound reverberating like a gunshot. "Are you insane?" he shouted. "Do you know what you've cost us?" I rose from my chair, slowly meeting his eyes. For years I had let him tower over me with his calm arrogance, his smooth words. But tonight, I stood level. "Cost you?" I echoed. "Do you mean the dinner you planned to use as a stage to announce our divorce? The dinner where you would humiliate me in front of your family and friends while Vanessa sat smiling carrying your child?" The blood drained from his face. His mouth opened, then closed again. "You—" he started, but I cut him off, my voice slicing through the air. "Yes, Sean. I know. I know about the texts. I know about the baby. I know about the divorce papers in your briefcase. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Did you really think I was so desperate to cling to you that I wouldn't see the truth?" For a moment, silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Then he whispered, "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." I laughed, a sound sharp and bitter. "You're right. It was supposed to happen at a long table in Rome with your mother smiling, your mistress glowing, and me erased. But I rewrote the script, and now you have nothing." His eyes hardened, but I saw the flicker of fear beneath the rage. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my body trembling but my heart steady. For the first time in years, I had spoken the truth without apology. The next morning, Rome buzzed with whispers. Guests complained of canceled reservations, of being turned away at the door. The Caldwells scrambled to salvage the night, but the damage was done. Eleanor's 70th birthday dinner, the event meant to cement her legacy, had become a humiliation splashed across social media. Photos of empty tables of guests milling in confusion, of waiters shrugging helplessly filled feeds. And though my name wasn't attached, I knew, and so did they. Back in Boston, the ripple effects grew. Vendors called me privately, whispering their support, reminding me that my reputation in the industry was ironclad, that I had nothing to fear. Andrea, my closest confidant in the business, came to my office and hugged me fiercely. "You didn't just cancel a dinner," she murmured. "You reclaimed your power." But the Caldwells weren't finished. Eleanor froze me out of every family interaction, sending word through Sean that I was no longer welcome. Their social circle, once mine by marriage, turned cold. Invitations disappeared. Whispered rumors painted me as unstable, vindictive, a woman scorned. And yet, in the quiet of my office, I felt something blooming. I had my company, my skills, my truth. The Caldwells could tarnish my name in their circles, but they couldn't erase my work. And in the end, work was my salvation. Still, nights were difficult. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, and feel the weight of betrayal pressing into my chest. Sean had been my husband, my partner, my supposed confidant. I had given him my trust, my love, my loyalty. And in return, he had planned my erasure like a corporate takeover. That wound cut deeper than any humiliation his family could inflict. One night, unable to sleep, I walked through the city until dawn. The streets were quiet, the storefronts dark, the air heavy with the scent of rain. I stood on the bridge overlooking the Charles River, the water black and still, and whispered to myself, "You are not disposable. You never were." The words felt foreign at first, but as they left my lips, they grew stronger, anchoring me. When I returned home, I knew I couldn't stay in limbo. I began divorce proceedings. My lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Valerie, listened as I laid out the texts, the papers, the betrayal. She nodded, her pen scratching across the page. "He underestimated you," she said. "They all did. That's their mistake. And we'll make sure it costs them." The weeks that followed were a blur of legal filings, depositions, whispered confrontations in court hallways. Sean tried to intimidate me, tried to charm me, tried to break me. But each time I met his eyes and remembered Rome. Remembered the empty tables, the canceled dinner, the power I had reclaimed. And slowly the narrative shifted. I was no longer the woman they had tried to erase. I was the woman who had stood up, who had refused to play the role they assigned me. But the battle was far from over. Because in the heart of every betrayal lies not just anger, but grief. And grief has a way of clawing at you when you least expect it. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and dust, the kind of place where secrets are stripped bare under fluorescent lights. I had walked into grand ballrooms with more confidence than I felt that morning, yet every step I took down the marble hallway made me taller somehow, as though the echoes of my heels were rehearsing courage for me. Sean was already there when I entered. He wore a navy suit that fit him like armor, his hair immaculately styled, his smile practiced for the cameras. But his eyes betrayed him flat, restless, the eyes of a man who had lost control of the narrative and was scrambling to take it back. I remembered those eyes the night in Rome, wide with fear as I told him I knew about Vanessa, about the baby, about the divorce papers he had prepared like a business plan. The proceedings began. His lawyers spoke of me as though I were a hurricane that had swept through his life without warning, vindictive, unstable, reckless. They painted me as the destroyer of his family's reputation, the bitter wife who canceled a dinner out of spite. I sat quietly, hands folded in my lap until it was my turn. Valerie, my lawyer, guided me gently, her questions deliberate and clear. I recounted everything, not in anger, not in theatrics, but in the steady, measured voice of a woman who had nothing left to lose. I told them about the texts, about the plans for divorce behind my back, about the child he conceived with another woman while I poured myself into making his mother's birthday a triumph. I told them about the humiliation, the missing chair, the public script that would have painted me disposable. When I spoke of the dinner in Rome, the cancellation, I felt every pair of eyes on me. I wasn't lashing out, I said, my throat tightening, but my voice steady. I was reclaiming myself. For years, I let them dictate my role, an accessory, a planner, a placeholder. That night, I decided I would no longer perform in their play. They wanted a perfect celebration, while they destroyed my life in the background. I refused to give them both. There was a murmur in the courtroom, the kind that ripples like wind across water. Sean shifted in his seat, his jaw tight, his hand tugging at his cufflink like a tell. For once, he had no words to charm his way out. The financial documents told the rest of the story. His investments crumbling, properties leveraged to cover debts, loans disguised as assets, the mighty Caldwell fortune more fragile than they wanted the world to see. My evidence, emails, contracts, financial records laid bare, not just his betrayal of me, but of everyone who trusted him. When the judge adjourned for the day, I walked past Sean without a glance. He muttered something, maybe my name, maybe an insult, but I didn't slow down. Outside, the press, swarmed cameras, flashing questions hurled. Valerie shielded me, but one reporter's voice cut through. "Do you regret what you did in Rome?" I stopped, turning slightly toward them. "No," I said simply. "I regret ever thinking I was disposable. But Rome was the beginning of my freedom." That night back in my apartment, the silence was deafening. I poured a glass of wine, set it down untouched, and sank onto the couch. The adrenaline from court drained away, leaving only the ache of memory. I saw Sean's smile in my mind, the one I fell in love with, the one that used to make me believe I was safe. I hated that part of me still mourned that illusion. Because love doesn't vanish just because trust does. Love lingers stubborn and cruel. I pressed my palms to my eyes, whispering, "You chose this. You don't get to break me again." The words trembled, but speaking them aloud gave them power. Days blurred into weeks. Court hearings, depositions, endless legal documents. I lost weight without noticing, my reflection sharper, my clothes looser. Friends reached out, some with pity, others with curiosity, but I answered few. I was tired of being someone's story. I wanted to reclaim my own. Work anchored me. Elite affairs, thrived clients whispering admiration behind closed doors, vendors rallying to my side. "You're stronger than them," Andrea reminded me during a late-night call. "They wanted to erase you, but you've become unforgettable." Still, grief had claws. Some nights I woke with tears on my cheeks, dreams of walking down that aisle replaying in cruel loops. I'd see myself in the gown bouquet trembling in my hands, smiling at guests, while knowing the man waiting for me had already betrayed me. Other nights I dreamed of Rome, the empty tables, the stunned faces, the taste of bittersweet triumph. Both dreams left me breathless, hollow, torn between rage and sorrow. Then came the day of final arguments. Sean's lawyer spoke of legacy of family of mistakes magnified by vindictive exaggeration. Valerie rose with quiet dignity, her voice steady as she painted the truth: a woman betrayed, humiliated, written out of her own marriage who refused to vanish silently. She spoke not just of contracts and finances, but of dignity, of identity, of the cost of betrayal. When the judge adjourned, I walked out into the crisp autumn air. Leaves spiraled down from trees, their colors burning like fire against the gray sky. For the first time in months, I felt the faintest flicker of peace. Not because it was over, it wasn't yet, but because I had stood tall, spoken truth, refused silence. On the subway ride home, a stranger sitting across from me studied me for a moment, then said softly, "You're the woman from the papers, aren't you? The one who stood up to them." I blinked, startled, then nodded. She smiled faintly. "Good for you." It was a small thing, but it warmed me. Because maybe my story wasn't just about betrayal. Maybe it was about something larger, about reminding women everywhere that silence is not the only choice. That night, I stood at my window, looking out at the city lights shimmering like stars scattered across the ground. My chest still ached, my scars still raw, but I whispered to the glass, "You survived." And slowly, I began to believe it. The verdict came on a Thursday morning. The air outside the courthouse was crisp, the kind that stung your cheeks and filled your lungs with a clarity you didn't ask for. Inside, the room was thick with anticipation, the gallery filled with faces, both curious and judgmental. I sat beside Valerie, hands clasped so tightly my knuckles whitened. When the judge read the decision, ruling in my favor on every contested point, awarding me fair compensation, confirming the validity of my claims, I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I simply exhaled a breath I felt like I'd been holding since Rome. Sean didn't look at me as the words echoed through the chamber. He stared straight ahead, his jaw locked, his skin pale. Eleanor sat behind him, her pearls tight around her neck, her face drawn like porcelain about to crack. The dynasty they clung to so fiercely had been pierced not just by financial exposure, but by the revelation that betrayal had corroded them from the inside out. Outside, the press descended. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward, questions hurled like stones. "Do you feel vindicated? What's next for you?" Anna Valerie guided me through the crowd, but once again I stopped. I looked directly at one of the cameras and said simply, "No one deserves to be erased. Not me. Not anyone." Then I walked on, leaving the noise behind me. In the days that followed, the Caldwell name tumbled like a toppled statue. Articles dissected Sean's financial mismanagement, his affair, the hypocrisy of a family that had branded themselves as pillars of tradition while rotting from within. Invitations they once received without question dried up overnight. Partnerships dissolved. Their carefully curated empire crumbled under the weight of truth. But even as their world collapsed, mine was only beginning to take shape again. At first, it felt strange to wake without dread pressing against my ribs. My apartment was quiet, my mornings my own. I poured coffee, opened my laptop, and returned to work with a hunger I hadn't felt in years. Elite affairs had weathered the storm. In fact, the scandal had unexpectedly thrust my company into the spotlight. Clients who admired my composure sought me out, not just for my planning, but for the story I carried. They wanted a woman who knew how to withstand fire and still orchestrate beauty. Andrea came over one night, with takeout cartons and wine, her eyes bright. "You know you've become something bigger than yourself, right?" she said between bites. I laughed, tired but genuine. What, the poster child for betrayed brides everywhere? Her smile softened. "No. For women who refuse to be erased, that matters more than you realize." Her words stayed with me. Still, healing wasn't a straight line. Nights came when grief pressed against me like a tide, pulling me into memories. I wanted to forget the sound of Sean's laugh the night before our wedding, the glint in Eleanor's eyes when she dismissed me, the sting of that empty chair in Rome. I wept, sometimes quietly, sometimes violently, until my body shook with it. But I let the tears come because grief is proof of love, and love, even when betrayed, deserves mourning. It was during one of those nights staring at the ceiling with swollen eyes that I realized something. I wasn't mourning Sean. I was mourning the woman I had been when I believed him. The woman who trusted too easily, who silenced her own instincts to keep the peace, who shrank herself to fit a role someone else had written. That version of me was gone. And maybe that was the gift hidden inside the wound. Months passed, and life slowly rebuilt itself in ways I hadn't anticipated. Elite Affairs expanded, hiring new planners, taking on clients from New York to Los Angeles. I began giving talks not just about event planning, but about resilience, about betrayal, truth, and the courage to walk away from the tables where you're no longer welcome. Women approached me afterward, tears in their eyes, telling me their own stories of exclusion, of humiliation, of silence. Every time I listened, I hugged them, and I reminded them of what I had learned in the hardest way: you are not disposable. One afternoon, as spring warmed the city, I met Diana for coffee. I hadn't spoken to her since the trial, and I almost didn't recognize her when she walked in smaller. Somehow her confidence dimmed. She sat across from me, her hands trembling as she stirred her tea. "I didn't call you here to defend Sean," she said quietly. "I called because I owe you an apology. For Rome, for the chair, for all the ways I let my silence become cruelty." I studied her for a long moment. Part of me wanted to lash out, to list every slight, every humiliation, every moment she had stood by, while her son and his mistress plotted my erasure. But another part of me, the part that had grown through scars, recognized what it took for her to sit across from me now. "You let it happen," I said simply. She nodded, tears spilling. "Yes, and I regret it, more than you'll ever know." I didn't forgive her, not entirely. But I also didn't hate her anymore. Hate ties you to the very people who tried to destroy you, and I was ready to be free. When she left, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "You were the daughter I should have fought for." The words echoed in me long after she walked away. That night, I returned to my apartment and lit a single candle by the window. Not for Sean, not for Eleanor, not even for Diana. I lit it for myself, for the woman who had walked into Rome humiliated and walked out unbroken. For the woman who had canceled a dinner and in doing so rewrote her life. I stood there watching the flame flicker against the glass and whispered, "You survived. You are still here." And for the first time, the words didn't feel like a mantra. They felt like truth. Spring settled into Boston with blossoms bursting along Commonwealth Avenue, pink petals scattering in the wind like confetti from a parade I never attended. A year had passed since Rome, yet the memory of that missing chair, of the laughter that excluded me, still lingered like a faint scar across my chest. But scars, I learned, are not marks of weakness. They are proof that we endured. Life had rebuilt itself in ways I hadn't anticipated. My company flourished. Elite Affairs expanded into new markets. My team doubled in size. And clients came not only for my reputation, but for the resilience they sensed in me. I was no longer just a planner of celebrations. I had become somehow a symbol of survival, of truth, spoken out loud, of dignity reclaimed. Still, the nights carried their ghosts. I'd lie awake sometimes listening to the city hum and remember the woman I had been before the betrayal, the hopeful bride who thought love could shield her from disdain. That woman felt like a stranger now, yet I honored her because her faith, though misplaced, had carried me until I was strong enough to carry myself. One afternoon, I stood in the old Caldwell estate. It had been sold, stripped of its grandeur, its furniture auctioned off to strangers. The new owners had invited me, oddly enough, to consult on restoring the ballroom. Walking through those halls felt like walking through a mausoleum of illusions. I touched the carved banister of the grand staircase and whispered to the air, "You don't own me anymore." And I meant it. Outside, reporters still chased fragments of the Caldwell downfall. Sean had faded from headlines, his empire dismantled, his name synonymous with scandal. Vanessa gave birth quietly, far from the society pages she once dreamed of dominating. Eleanor retreated into obscurity, her pearls gathering dust instead of admiration. Their story was one of decline. Mine was one of rebirth. But healing wasn't only about distance from them. It was about the choices I made each day. I chose to host seminars for women in business, sharing not just strategies, but survival stories. I chose to sit with women who had been humiliated, dismissed, erased, and remind them of what I once whispered to myself on a bridge over the Charles, "You are not disposable." At one seminar, a woman stood during the Q&A, her voice trembling as she said, "How do you stop hating them? The ones who broke you." The room grew still, every face turned toward me. I paused, searching for the truth in my chest. "You don't stop hating them all at once," I said softly. "You stop when you realize hate keeps you tied to them. You stop when you decide your future matters more than their memory. And one day you wake up and they're no longer the center of your story. You are." The applause that followed was not for me, but for themselves, for every woman in that room choosing to rise. That night, I walked home under a sky smeared with stars, and for the first time in a long while, I felt light. The weight of betrayal no longer pressed me down. It floated behind me, part of my past, part of my strength. As I sit here now telling you this story, I want you to understand, betrayal did not define me. Betrayal revealed me. It stripped away illusions, forced me into a fire I never asked for, and showed me the steel I carried inside. Yes, I mourned. Yes, I broke. Yes, I raged. But in the end, I rebuilt not into who I was, but into someone stronger, truer, freer. So if you are listening and carrying wounds of your own, if someone tried to erase you, humiliate you, betray you, know this: your scars are not shameful. They are maps of survival, and you too can rise. Because survival is not about pretending the pain never happened. It's about standing tall, even with trembling knees, and saying, "You didn't destroy me. I am still here." And I am still here. If my story touched you, if it reminded you of your own strength, I ask you to walk this path with me. Like this video, share it with someone who needs courage today. Subscribe so we can keep building a community where no one is disposable. And leave me a comment. Tell me your story, your scars, your strength. Together, our voices are louder than betrayal.